Anyone got a pencil? Hello and welcome to the Mixtape podcast. I'm your host, Mark Phillips, and every week I'll be asking my guests to make up a mixtape. I'll ask them for a title and 5 tracks. Track 1, what's your intro? What's your attention grabber? What's going to be the song that's going to pull me in and make me want to listen to the rest of your tape? Track 2, what's a song that you sing loud and proud when you're on your own in the car or the shower? Track 3, I'm going to ask them to get a little bit obscure and pick maybe a B-side or an album track. Track 4, pick a song that you would like to have played to your 18-year-old self. And track 5, pick a song that you would put on your mixtape to let the listener know you're romantically interested. Due to the music being licensed content, you will have to click into the description of the podcast to hear the songs my guests pick on the accompanying Spotify playlist. Don't forget to smash the follow button or the plus sign and you'll be notified every time there's a new episode. Thanks for listening and I hope you enjoy this chat. Welcome to the Mixtape, and my guest on the show tonight is Stu Whiffen. To give you a bit of background, we've known each other since, what would it be, Stu, 9 or 10 years old when we were at school together? Yeah, and then I think we went to high school together, and you went to Palmer's and I went to Thurrock Tech, and we sort of lost touch a little bit. And then I did the Reach Out for Mental Health podcast with yourself and the lovely Kirsty, who we'll get to later on. And we reconnected there. And to coin a phrase, Stu, you've got your finger in quite a few pies in terms of podcasting. And so podcaster, magazine publisher. What would you call the brush, Stu? Is it a live venue or a nightclub? How do you categorise it?
I normally just say venue because, as much as it's very much on the gig circuit, for a good sort of 20, 25 years, of more recent times, certainly post-COVID, it's sort of generally maintains its weekend club nights and the live nights are fewer and far between that.
Right, okay. And you started there as a DJ, right, back in the day?
I did, yeah. About 1991, I started there, and it's for listeners that have no idea about the Pink Toothbrush in Rayleigh. It's the longest running alternative club in the UK. It was previously called Crocs in the early '80s, and was the resident band would have been Depeche Mode, and it's played home to the first gigs for Culture Club, and Soft Cell played there, and then sort of moving into the sort of late '80s, early '90s, it was a firm fixture on the live scene, and we famously got the contract for Radiohead that agreed to play the Pink Toothbrush for the sum of £50 and a crate of beer, supporting the songs of Ping FC. And yeah, over the years, the likes of Ice-T's played there, and everyone sort of graced that stage at some point, and it's always been a weekend venue for sort of alternative clubbing and all your indie hits and such. And it's my little baby that I can't seem to get away from. And even over lockdown, when I thought this pandemic thing was going to last a couple of weeks, I was like, it'd be nice to have a couple of weekends off. But even 2 weeks in, I was just like, I miss my club. As a couple of old bastards, Mark, it keeps me feeling young, mate. And
it's not even work, is it?
Them grey hairs in your beard, there, mate, and I've got plenty of them. And that working in the clubs with the youngsters does kind of take my gaze away from my grey beard. Which the more I'm finding these podcasts and such are being done remotely, the more I find myself sitting staring at my own stupid face more often, and like literally just greyer and greyer every time I turn Zoom on, mate.
You touched on COVID there, Stu, in the venue, and I know there was a time like during COVID and the pandemic, especially in the UK, that the sort of the future of the club was kind of financially like really unstable. But tell the story about the carpet, Stu, because for me, when I heard about that was an absolute stroke of genius, mate. I was just like, what an idea. Whoever came up with that, I'd like to shake their hand.
So the club, if anybody ever comes to the club, or if you ever go on TripAdvisor and read any reviews of the club, they'll go, great music, smells a bit stale, but but everybody talks about how sticky the carpet is. And for a club that's been going, over well, it would have been, as the Pink Toothbrush, we celebrate our 40th anniversary next year. And anybody that's been in that place over 40 years will at one point go, my shoe got stuck to the carpet, lost my flip flop. You don't call them flip flops in Australia, do you?
But yeah, I was just gonna say for the Australian listeners, flip flop means thong. Yeah,
thongs mean something very different in the UK.
Yeah.
There's probably been a couple of them sort of thongs as well stuck on that carpet over the years.
I imagine so.
But what everybody references the sticky carpet, so we needed a new carpet anyway. And over lockdown, we was shut for so long. We was looking at ways and means to sort of finance and pay the bills to keep the venue. And we basically cut our carpet up into small squares, framed them, and sold them. And we sold well over 1,000 of them. And then we done little key rings for bits of the carpet. Everybody wanted a bit of this dirty, sticky, smelly, sweaty, beer-covered, gross carpet. And it helped pay the bills. And it was and it's lovely. Like the joy of people queuing up, to come to the front door of the club and walk away with a little framed bit of dank carpet was lovely to see. And yeah, it is very much in essence the way that we operate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to round out your intro, Stu, just talk us through some of your podcasts, because I know you've got a few on the go at the moment.
Yeah, so I started my podcasting career as for a mate of mine who's a very established podcaster in the UK, a former musician called Scroobius Pip, and he, for some reason, invited me and my friend Chris onto his podcast to be called what were called Drunkcasts, and we done that, and we really enjoyed it. And he was like, "Why don't you two do a podcast?" And we was like, well, "Who the hell would listen to a couple of old guys from Essex just banging on in chatting away in my shed?" And it happened to sort of go really well, and we done it, and I think we're fast approaching 400 episodes now, and it's been so much fun. And one of the things that would sort of happen on that podcast, the idea behind it is it's a top five. So guests come on and they pick a top five. So it can be anything from sandwich fillings to favorite records, but we'd often interview musicians, and it was on them episodes that I used to get overexcited and carried away talking music. And as much as Chris is, like me, is a DJ as well, he hasn't got that kind of nerdy passion for music that I have. And I could see him sort of zoning out sometimes. So I was like, look, I'm going to set up my own music podcast on the side of this and really indulge myself. And I set that up about a year before lockdown. And I've worked quite hard on that. I try and get 2 episodes out every week. Which does take a bit of work, and I've literally just approaching 500 episodes of that one now, and I've been really lucky to have had some amazing guests on that. And it's a loosely based on sort of Desert Island Discs kind of format, which is a very successful British podcast about music. And it's me just talking about the creative journey of the artists that I've had on, and I love it. And aside from that, I work with a mutual friend called Kirsty, and we do a podcast, the Reach Out for Mental Health podcast, where we have guests on and we talk about their stories and their relationships with their mental health and how it's affected their lives. And we've had some amazing people on there. And I have how many other podcasts have I got? I've got one with a which is probably my favourite one to do, and I only do it once a month, and it's with my oldest friend, and it's called Acceptable in the 80s, and it's my friend is called Cunt, from a one-man kind of music and comedy act called Cunt and the Gang with a K, and he's a kind of sort of guerrilla punk artist, really, who's had lots of top 10 hits in the UK, kind of taking swipes at the royal family and at Boris Johnson, and I have nothing but absolute admiration, and I'm consistently in awe of my best mate. He blows my mind with his ideas and the way that he goes about them, and we have a podcast where we look back. We've been friends for for over 40 years, and we go back 40 years to the month each month and talk about the records and the films and just the dumb shit that we got up to. And it's not one for putting on in the car when you got the kids in it. It's a little bit blue, bit of effing and jeffing, but it's a lot of fun. And lastly, I do have an MMA podcast. I co-host a podcast with Blake Harrison from the Inbetweeners, and we talk to the kind of cream of the UFC community and guests and such. And recently had for you Aussies out there that follow UFC, had Alexander Volkanovski, arguably, in my opinion, pound for pound best fighter on the planet. And we've had other Aussie fighters like Dan Hooker on, and we talk to fighters about. But rather than just the sort of fight career, just lots of things that happen behind the curtain. You know, we want to know about weight cuts. We want to know about how they deal mentally with the pressures of it. How, you know, what they do the moment before they walk out into a sold out arena. And again, like music, mixed martial arts is a big passion of mine. So, you know, if I get to talk about it and it means that I get to interview interesting people, then I'm a happy boy. So that's me and podcasting. There's a lot, mate. Sorry.
Do you even call it work, Stu? Because it just sounds like it's just an absolute labour of love. Like everything you do, you're buzzing off of, and that's the dream for a lot of people. I think is just to do what you love for a living. Do you know what I mean? It can't even feel like work, does it?
Well, I mean, sometimes I have to check myself because, you know, I will be like, I say it a lot. My wife's saying, like, fuck's sake, got like 3 podcasts today. And I just think, do you know what? I've spent years like working with portal cabins, like modular buildings. I spent years as a window fitter in the pissing rain up ladders. And I just think, oh yeah, that's fucking hard work, and it's sitting down your shed banging on about UFC or music to like someone that's, you know, one of your heroes. So no, I'm really lucky. But you know, as any podcaster will tell you, you know, it don't come easy. You do have to kind of keep plugging away at it. And like I said to you, you know, I've got no background in broadcasting or anything like that, you know. And so yeah, it's not work. And don't get me wrong, I stand outside that club at 3 o'clock in the morning thinking I'm 50 years old. Why am I still doing this? But the minute it's not there, I miss it. So
Yeah, exactly right, exactly right. And I'll never forget, Stu, the inspirational words of encouragement that you gave me when I first started talking to you about doing a podcast. I think it was along the lines of, if a muppet like me can crack it, you'll have no problems, mate. And I'll never forget that. As long as my podcasting career lasts, those words will stay with me forever. All right, let's get into the meat of the podcast then, mate. So your mixtape that I'm going to ask you to make up 5 tracks. What's the title of your mixtape, Stu?
5 Shades of Greys.
Oh, nice, 5 Shades of Greys. That's wicked. So I'll do sort of similar sort of thing you do on Off the Beaten Track is I'll put the tracks together in a Spotify playlist and link it in the description when I put it up. So 5 Shades of Greys, that's fantastic. Okay, so track 1 is Your Attention Grabber, Stu. That's going to make me want to listen to the rest of your tape. So what have you gone with there?
Going hard, always, Mark. And it's a track that starts I've gone for Never Let Me Down Again by Depeche Mode. And part of me wants to go have a live version because for anybody that's seen Depeche Mode live, you know that this track is the pinnacle of every Depeche Mode live gig. There's a moment, there's a middle 8 where it breaks down, and they've really accentuated it over the years and made it sort of bigger and more epic. And it's an epic sounding record anyway. But they break it down and it builds and builds and builds. And then literally Dave Gahan will come to the front of the stage, and I have to sort of try and describe this and make it sound not as kind of weird as it may sound. And he will stand there with his arms above his head and sway them from left to right, which alongside that music and that music hitting this pinnacle at this point, and the whole crowd mirrors him. And Depeche Mode have, I don't need to tell listeners of this podcast, how big that band are. Fiercely proud they're from our home county as well. And being, I've been lucky to be in that crowd and have my arms above my head, swaying them, looking back at Dave Gahan as Messiah-esque as he conducts thousands of people, whilst Martin Gore he's playing guitar, and obviously until recently Fletch on keys, and the fact that they've kind of upped it now to around the time of Faith and Devotion, when Alan Wilder was still in the band, they had Alan Wilder drumming, and over the years that they've changed drummers. At one point, Anton Corbijn, the photographer and videographer that has obviously done so much iconic work with Depeche Mode, U2, and Joy Division, played drums. It was his lifelong dream to play drums for Depeche Mode, and he got to play some shows with Mode. And I just would tell anybody that would question why this track's here to go and Google on YouTube, Depeche Mode "Never Let Me Down Again" live, and it's absolutely phenomenal. So I'm going to go for the live version of that for my opener.
I had two notes against this song, Stu, that you chose, and you touched on both points there. One was the popularity of Depeche Mode. I think they're one of those sorts of bands. They could not put out a record or do any press or publicity or even a tweet or an Instagram post for 10 or 15 years. They'll announce a tour and they'll sell out stadiums all over the world. They're just that deeply ingrained in the sort of pop music sort of culture. I think they could do that easily. And the other note I had was Pride of Essex. Like every time I have a conversation with someone about Depeche Mode, I can't wait to tell them. Do you know what I mean? That they're from Essex, right near from where I grew up. Like it's unreal. Like they feel like your own. Do you know what I mean? Like because we've grown up with them in that sort of 80s, from the beginning. So great choice, mate. Certainly that.
Just two things on that quickly, Mark. Like you talk about, they can just announce a gig. I think it was just before the pandemic, at the time where Ed Sheeran and Adele were doing these global tours. The biggest selling live act in the world was Depeche Mode. They were still selling more tickets than these acts. And they don't get the respect they deserve in the UK, I don't think. And,
no, definitely not.
Yeah, and I will send you some copies of the desk recordings I've got of a very, very primitive Depeche Mode playing the Pink Toothbrush.
With the brush. That'd be awesome, mate. Yeah. That'd be wicked.
It's fantastic. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, track 2. I asked you to pick a song that you sing loud and proud if you're in the car or at the risk of putting an image of you naked in my head in the shower when you're, on your own and just cutting loose, mate. Sing with your eyes closed. Which track do you go for?
I woke up this morning and looked at your picture just to get me started. The words to "Never Too Much" by Luther Vandross are etched in my mind. I think it's a fantastic record. In fact, I think the "Never Too Much" album is a phenomenal record. We grew up at a time, Mark and I are the same age, obviously you touched on, we went to school together. We grew up at an age where the soul scene was huge in Essex. There was a venue called the Gold Mine, which was the epicenter of like soul music in the UK. And we kind of got the overspill of that. And I think by the time we was getting to sort of like 13, 14, the kind of soul scene had moved into Alexander O'Neill and Luther Vandross, and this was just sort of pre the kind of new Jack Swing stuff with the Teddy Riley stuff like Bobby Brown and things like that. But for me, when I go back to and listen to Luther Vandross, I think his voice is remarkable. I love the fact he's discovered by Bowie. You can hear him singing on Young Americans. And you realise how good his voice is there when it cuts through. You can hear it cutting through over Bowie, and I think "Never Too Much" was the last record he done before technology changed the way that a lot of records in the 80s were made. All of a sudden, drum machines were being used a whole lot more, and this is the last record that he done that sounds more of that sort of authentic style of recording, where guitars, bass, keyboards, and stuff, and I love that. And there's a beautiful cover of the Burt Bacharach track, "House Is Not a Home" on there, which I'd say to anybody, go and listen to, or go and watch his performance of that at the it might have been the Soul Train Awards or something, and he's singing it in front of Dionne Warwick, who I believe sung the first version that Bacharach wrote. But "Never Too Much," it's just a perfect record. You can still play at any disco now, everybody knows every word to that record because it's such a storybook. The way it's told,
Mm.
you know, it's his day,
Yeah.
and it's. I just think it's post disco. It's kind of it's post funk, but it's like it's a perfect single, and yeah, it just if you're ever struggling as a DJ, you drop that, and like girls are going to dance. And if the girls are dancing, the guys are
Yeah.
dancing, and it get you out of trouble,
Mm.
and yeah, and it's if I had to say, there's not many songs I know all the words to, just because I've got too many songs in my head. I know all the
Mm.
words to that song because I've heard it so many times, and I'll never get bored of it.
When I read that that was your choice, Stu, um, I immediately pictured you singing it so clearly that I must have seen you singing that a lot, like at school or something like that, because I could see it so vividly in my mind. I was like, he must have been getting around school singing that in the sort of mid 80s when we were at school. Absolutely, like crystal clear. I could see you
Yeah.
singing it. Okay, track three, Shu. I asked you to get a little bit obscure and pick a B side or an album track. Which one did you go for?
Well, I thought about B sides, and the B side of Never Enough by The Cure is a track called Harold and Joe, and I very nearly went with that, but I didn't because I work in an indie club, and I guess maybe a lot of people maybe that I know would perceive me as like indie music's being my go to genre. I wouldn't necessarily say it is, but I think if you start talking about indie B sides, you become indie wanker. So I was like, right, I might swerve the B side and go for the album track. Um, so I have, and I've gone from a, it was very close. Both were R.E.M. tracks, and I very nearly went for Hair Shirt from the album Green, which is very probably, if not my favourite R.E.M. track, this one is, and it's from the album Out of Time, and it's a track called Country Feedback. And when REM, I'd be lying if I said that I was buying all the records that REM were releasing on IRS, throughout the 80s. I wasn't. I was listening to Luther Vandross and Alexander O'Neill, and the world of REM presented itself to me probably about 1989 when somebody called John Shasha, who we went to school with,
Mm.
bought Green, and I'd heard Orange Crush, and I remember going around his house, and he bought that, and he bought End of the Innocence by Don Henley, and I weren't interested in Don Henley, and I remember just thinking, I'm not really feeling this. But then he put Green on, and I remember hearing Stand, and then I remember hearing Pop Song '89, and I was like, then I Turn You Inside Out, and I was like, oh my god, this is amazing,
Mm.
and and so that was how I kind of sort of got into REM. But they were still an underground band, it's certainly in the UK at this point. But they'd signed that major for Green, they signed to Warner for that album, and then it just seemed, I don't know how it happened, but they dropped the next record. Um, and am I right in saying, I've got to get my facts right now, was Losing My Religion the lead single, or did Radio Song come first? Radio Song opens the album, so maybe I'm confused there. It was Losing My Religion was the single, followed by Shiny Happy People, followed by Near Wild Evan, then Radio Song, I believe.
You showed me up there because I was going to say Shiny Happy People, but yeah, I would have been wrong.
Yeah, I think it was Losing My Religion, and it become obviously global hit,
Mm.
and Losing My Religion is a phenomenal record. Uh, and I remember buying Out of Time, and it set up my obsession with that band, and there's a track on there called Country Feedback, and it's always, do you know what? There's so many things I lean back towards live. Um, but any live performance of REM, Michael Stipe's a phenomenal frontman and very underrated. Um, and he's so engaging on stage, but every time they play Country Feedback, he's static, his eyes roll in his head, and he just goes somewhere.
Mm.
And there's lots of sort of thoughts on what that song's about. There was lots of, he was very outspoken policy around AIDS in the early
Mm.
'90s, and that getting the attention it deserved. And I'd heard some stories that there was references to in the lines "crazy what you could have had," and there's something deeply personal to him and that record, and it comes across in the record, and it comes across in performance, and it's just a masterpiece of a record. And as a band, that if you look through their back catalogue now, which is ridiculously huge and brilliant, as singles, they've just put out great single after great single. But when you start to scratch the surface of these albums, I mean, don't get me wrong, like Out of Time and Automatic for People were probably two of the biggest selling records in the '90s. They were, everybody owned them records, and rightly so. But Country Feedback, yeah, there's something very special about that record.
I think I read an interview with Peter Buck 2 years ago, and I think he basically said that when they were recording that record, that Michael Stipe just came in the studio for the vocal on that, and whatever was, he hadn't written anything down. It was just what was on his mind at the time in his head just came out. And I know what you're saying with the live stuff. Like the Jules Holland performance is quite good, and like
That's the one. That's the one.
Every performance of that live is unreal. And shout out to BJ Cole as well on that record.
Oh, slide guitar.
I don't think he plays on the record, but all the live versions I've seen, he plays on that as well. And he's a phenomenal, like, he's played with everybody, man. Like he replaced Nick McCabe in the Verve, I think, for the
I
last few
saw
gigs.
I saw their last gig with BJ on slide
Yeah,
guitar,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
that there, if you're stepping in to replace Nick McCabe,
I
how
know.
good are you?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, yeah, yeah. He's done like I think he's most famous for he plays on Tiny Dancer, and that was kind of where he came to like sort of prominence. And he's done stuff with like Steve Marriott. I think John Cale, he toured with his band for a while. He's been on Bjork records. Tell you what else he played on. He plays on Ladies and Gentlemen, We're Floating in Space as well.
That
He's on
figures.
that. Yeah, he's Bjork. I think he's been on. He's been on so many records. He's just like, if you want pedal steel guitar, he's your go-to guy. Like every
Yeah,
day of the week. Have you seen R.E.M live, Stu?
yeah, many times. I got to see them at Milton Keynes Bowl, supported by Blur, where Blur first they debuted Country
Yeah,
House
right.
at
Yeah.
that show. Supported by Blur, Belly, who I was a huge fan of,
Oh yeah, yeah, I remember
Magnapop.
him. Yeah.
I can't think who else was on that bill. And then I did see them at Brixton Academy do a Glastonbury warm up, and
Right. Okay. Yeah.
that's, I'm sure I probably told you this story, but they always finish with "It's the end of the world as we know it," and I was right at the front, and I just got it right. I just really got being pissed right. I hadn't drunk too much where I had to go and keep going for a piss, and I wasn't too sort of pent up. I just got it right where everything was
Mm.
perfect, and as the gig come to, I mean, it was a Glastonbury one, so it's Brixton came as a small venue for R.E.M at this
Mm.
point.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think they've maybe just put out I reckon it was after Up, so it was
Mm.
probably around the time of Reveal, and he's come to the front of the stage, and I've put my hand out to shake his hand, and he's put the microphone in my hand,
No way.
and so as a former and failed musician,
I
all
didn't
I'm
mention
thinking
that in the
is,
intro.
I'm thinking, fuck me, I'm playing Brixton Academy and I got R.E.M backing me. So I fucking went for it. So I am singing at the
Ah,
top of
brilliant.
my lungs. And anyway, obviously I've got people jumping in my head, all trying to wrestle this mic off
Yeah.
me. And
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah.
thinking,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
ain't going to happen, mate. It
No.
ain't going to happen. Anyway, security pull me out, and standing in front of me is Michael Stipe, who mouths the words, "Are you okay?" And I'm
Yeah.
like this kind of wide-eyed, sort of like teenage girl, just go yes, and just like give him this microphone back, and he finishes the song. Fast forward to the following Saturday at the club, and there was this guy called John I knew, who was a huge R.E.M fan, and he'd messaged me in the week some photos of him meeting Bill Berry, not Bill Berry, Peter Buck and Mike Mills outside. And he said, I got up there really early. I was like, man, I can't believe you met him. He went, I've got something for you at the weekend that you're going to love. And I was like, oh, maybe he's printed off a picture for him or something like that.
Yeah.
So anyway, he turns up and he said, I've got the bootleg. And so I owned the CD of me
Oh,
singing It's
that's
the End as Well As We
awesome.
Know It of R.E.M. If you ever want to know what Chaz and Dave fronting R.E.M. sounds like, I have a CD. For Australian listeners,
Oh,
Chaz and Dave, something that I'd never try and explain to you. You just have to go and try and look at it to
yeah.
make sense of Chaz and Dave because it doesn't work outside of the UK. Uh,
Oh, mate.
but um,
What
but
a
yeah, I
memory.
fronted R.E.M. Mark.
Oh, what a memory to have, Stu. That's awesome. Great story. Oh, that's wicked. That's wicked. So, track 4, pick a track that you would like to have played to your 18-year-old self.
I'll go Caroline No from Pet Sounds because at 18,
That's
the
not
Beach
cool, is
Boys
it?
for me. Well, do you know what? Surfing USA, and all stuff like that just made me think of Teen Wolf and and we
Yeah.
all knew all of the Surfing USA and I'll Get Around and stuff like that, which were just, everybody loves them Beach Boys songs,
Mm.
but I didn't. I remember buying the NME and they was talking about the best albums ever, and Pet Sounds was on there. I remember looking at the cover and they're all Brian and Carl are a bit bloated with beards, and Mike Love's just got his big old beard, and it was like I'm just used to seeing these young bucks with
Mm.
their surfboards. Obviously, Dennis Wilson still looked cool as fuck, um,
Yeah.
and I was like, what's this? And I looked at all the tracks on there, and I was like, oh, I know. I don't think I even really knew God Only Knows at that point, but I knew. Wouldn't it be nice?
Mm.
And and I was like, I don't really know any of these other songs. And it was only really when Frank Black released Hang On to Your Ego, I was like, oh, that's on that album. And it's a Beach Boys cover. And I was like, right. And then it was probably when I got to about 20, like HMV in Lakeside near where we live, you'd always be able to go in there and get classic albums on CD for like $3.99. There'd be
Mm.
selected ones. And Pet Sounds was there. And my three favorite albums I bought around that time, which is that What's Going On and Astral Weeks,
Mm.
and I bought them all in them little deals.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, much the same with What's Going On. I knew the track What's Going On and Mercy Mercy Me, but I didn't know the
Yeah.
rest of it. And when I heard it, I was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
"Where's all the Motown hits? Where's all
Yeah.
the And then then it
Yeah. Yeah.
resonates that she's way much more than that.
Mm.
And
Mm.
yeah, and it's quite strange when I've never really thought of this until I've just said all three of them in a row because for somebody that has always said I've just obsessed with the perfect pop record, I've chose three concept albums as my favourite albums, which
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
quite
Yeah.
quite odd.
Not a perfect
Uh,
pop song in any of them. Yeah.
no,
No, it's brilliant.
no,
Yeah.
not at all. So yeah, I will go with Caroline No by the Beach Boys.
You remember or are you aware of a band called Gidea Park, Stu?
Gidea Park.
They were like if you ordered the Beach Boys off a Wish, that's what you got. They're from Gidea Park in Romford, and that's where they got their name from. And they were like a Beach Boys like knockoff, like surf sort of tracks. Yeah, have a look. Yeah, yeah, they were just shocking, mate. In the
Wow.
'80s and early '90s, Gidea Park. Yeah,
Because
I'll always
you had
remember
the
them.
High Llamas, didn't you? The High
Mm,
Llamas
mm.
done some fantastic kind of Beach Boys esque stuff. Gidea Park. I want to go and check them out.
Yeah, have a look, mate. Yeah, they're shockingly bad. They're like, yeah, sort of a cross between Beach Boys and Shiwaddy Waddy. They're just terrible, like really, really bad.
Now you're selling it.
Oh dear. Okay, last track of your mixtape, Stu.
Mm.
Track 5. Pick a song that you would play, put on the mixtape to let the listener know that you're romantically interested.
I'm again going home county. I'm going to go for the Bar Barking, and I'm going to go for Billy Bragg and a track from Workers' Playtime called "Must I Paint You a Picture," and it's a beautiful, beautiful song. Billy Bragg on that record. There's so many love songs that are ripped you in half. There's a love song called "Valentine's Day Is Over" on that record, which is an absolute mate. And and the reason I said this is because uh, if I take myself back to my first year at college, there was a girl that done R that I was absolutely in my head had just kind of pictured our whole lives together and how I was going to get home from work. She was going to be like sort of Joni Mitchell, just sitting in the front room playing guitar.
Yeah.
She just wrote another song about me, and then we was just going to come and listen to records all night. And I don't even think I liked red wine at the time, but probably drink red wine. I think it was cool. I had it all planned out, Mark, and I'd never spoke to her. I was too terrified. But in my head, like that was it. We was together forever. And I'm not a dangerous loner. I should stress that. I've never been arrested for any of that kind of behaviour, but I did. I was obsessive. I thought she was amazing, but I just didn't have the confidence to go and tell her. And but at that point, it was a fella called Richard, and I don't even remember his second name, but I met him in a pub one afternoon when I was about 18, and he told me to play guitar. He was at the Ship in Little Thurrock, and he said, "Oh, do you play guitar?" I said, "Oh, a little bit." And he said, "Oh, like what stuff are you into?" I said, "Like, oh, I like the Smiths and all of your kind of angsty teen stuff." And he said, "Oh, do you like Billy Bragg?" And I was like, "Yeah, I don't mind him. Like, I'm not really, into sort of political music much." And he said, "No, have you never heard his love songs?" And I'd only really heard his cover of "She's Leaving Home" that went to #1 in the 80s, and probably New England. And then he was like, "Yeah, you can check this out." And he lent me this record. And it was amazing to hear somebody sing with such vulnerability and love in their voice and sound like me and my mates.
It's exactly what I was just going to say. He sings with that Essex accent, doesn't he? It's awesome. Yeah, I love that. Yeah,
and I was like, this is incredible. And the album starts with "Must I Paint Me a Picture," and it's just a heartbreaker. And I remember thinking, right, and so I wrote the words down to that, and I gave it to my mate Joe to give to this girl. She just wrote me a letter back saying, "Oh, thanks. I appreciate the letter and stuff. I don't really like Billy Bragg, but I like the sentiments. But I've got a boyfriend." That was it, mate. Broken.
Gutted.
And,
Gutted.
but yeah, but what had come from that, the positive that I took from that was I discovered Billy Bragg, who to this day is one of my favourite artists, and I think I've my politics are not too far from his, and I just love what he's done. And it wasn't long after that he then released "Sexuality," and "You Woke Up My Neighborhood" with Mike Mills and Peter Buck and Michael Stipe doing harmonies on and playing mandolin on, and that "Don't Try This at Home" record come out in the early 90s, and that's got "Tank Park Salute," which I would say approach with caution if you're feeling sad or you've lost someone. Approach with caution, because this song will rip you in half. And yeah, I just love the fact that he sings the way he sings, and he can absolutely floor me with the romanticism in how he writes, and yet he sounds like your mate down the pub.
Yeah, he's a easy geezer.
And I love it.
My track, I think it's on his best of. I don't know what album it's off of, but have you heard him do "Walk Away Renee"?
Oh, it's amazing.
Oh, how good is that? How good is that? Like it's incredible. Like I'm putting together a spoken word show for the future for the radio show, and I was like, that's going on there straight away. Like the first time she spoke to me, my nose bled, and she guessed the rest. Like it's just oh mate, it's just superb. Like I absolutely love that, and the guitar work on that's brilliant. So simple, but we can't talk about Billy Bragg as well as two Essex boys without mentioning A13 Trunk Road to the Sea either. Because that is just like, oh man, that is just an absolute banger, isn't it? I absolutely love that track.
So good.
Like any song that mentions Grace Thurrock, I'm like, go on, get in there. It's brilliant.
There ain't many.
No, I know there's not. It's probably the only one. Yeah, for anyone listening who's not familiar, Billy Bragg's, as Stu mentioned at the start, is known as the Bard of Barking, and Barking's on the very eastern side of London, which is sort of the border with Essex, is where we're from. And the county of Essex runs along all the way out to the estuary on the North Sea, and the A13 is the main road that follows that route. And so Billy Bragg released a track called A13 Trunk Road to the Sea, which name checks almost every sort of town along that road, to the sort of parody kind of tune of Route 66, kind of, in a way.
Yeah.
And it's just, yeah, it's an Essex boy's dream, isn't it? Like, I used to drive me in Mark III Escort down the A13 to go and see gigs at the Esplanade and the Sunrooms and that in Southend, and I'd have that blasting like all the way. It's an absolute banger. That, love that tune.
Me to go and find out if Gideon Park have referenced Grace Thurrock in any of their back catalogue now.
They literally took their name from Gideon Park. They're from Romford, I think. Well, that's where they're from. So yeah, check them out, mate. I'll dig out a link and send you a link. They're absolutely shocking. Thanks so much for finding the time and coming on the podcast, Stu. I really appreciate it, mate. I know you're a super busy man. So yeah, thanks so much, mate. Really appreciate you coming on.
Mark, honestly, I love this podcast and I think it's brilliant what you're doing. And yeah, it's a real privilege to be on here. Thanks loads, mate.
That was a Mixtape podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to jump up to the top of the page and smash that follow button, and you'll be notified every time there's a new episode. Or follow me on Instagram @TheMixtapePerf. Till the next time.